Series of upcoming specialties. Our next talk on diverse disease reversal through lifestyle and emerging concept. I would like to welcome Dr. Esther. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Medicine.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the organizing committee for giving us this opportunity. So let me start with what is lifestyle medicine, because it's quite an upcoming specialty. That's how we were introduced. So it is an evidence-based medical specialty that uses lifestyle. What do we mean by lifestyle? Optimal nutrition, which is predominantly whole food and plant-based, plant-based dietary pattern and physical activity, stress management, adequate sleep, hydration, social support, and avoidance of risky substances. This is what is meant by an optimal lifestyle. And what do we use this for? These are therapeutic interventions to prevent, treat, and even reverse lifestyle-related chronic diseases. So how do we have a different look at medicine in general? We treat symptoms according to the traditional concept, but in lifestyle medicine, we look a little deeper. We try to identify the root cause of the disease and address that in order to tackle the disease per se. So when I say we look at the root cause of the problem, let's look at this iceberg picture. We have cardiovascular diseases, we have cancers, chronic respiratory diseases, diabetes. These are the top killers. And we just see them and treat them as they are. But if we dig a little deeper to do the root cause analysis, we find that there are certain risk factors which predispose someone to develop these diseases. And little deeper, we find something called behavioral risk factors, which include what we said as the unhealthy diet, lack of physical activity, harmful substance use. And further down, if we dig a little more deeper, we find the social determinants sitting at the root cause of all of this. So how do we address this as doctors? When we sit in the clinic, we see the patients coming with this. But do we need to move our politics? Do we need to move our country at a higher level to address all this, having a down to top approach? So how do we explain this in terms of biological pathways? So here I would like to draw your attention to the behavioral risk factors, which are here: unhealthy diet, sedentary lifestyle, and so on. And we see that this leads to disruption of normal biology. There's disrupted chronobiology. There's alteration in the patient's microbiome. There are epigenetic changes. There's oxidative stress and cellular injury and impaired metabolism. So all this sets off into an inflammatory state, which is chronic, which is what leads to all the non-communicable diseases that we see. So where does lifestyle play a role? Lifestyle interventions can address the behavioral risk factors, and they can also intervene at any of these stages to help treat and also reverse to a certain extent. So the 6 pillars that we call in lifestyle medicine are nutrition, physical activity, stress management, restorative sleep, social connection, and avoidance of risky substances. So I have this tough job of talking about the cutting edge in lifestyle medicine. So I'm going to talk on a case for disease reversal, remission, or cure. So I'm going to draw help from Sir Austin Bradford Hill himself. He is the favorite medical statistician of all time. So this is his statement when he argued for chronic smoking leading to lung cancer in the paper published and written by him in 1965. So he says we grasp the shadow and lose the substance sometimes when we draw hard on statistics. So he instructs us, the chi-square test is an excellent servant, but a bad master. So with that, having said that at the outset, let me go on little more with Sir Bradford Hill. So these are the criteria that he laid down for a causal association, and the newest addition is reversibility. So in his original 9 criteria, reversibility was not there. It is newly been added, and lifestyle medicine talks about reversibility. So the framework of my talk will flow across these things, and let me start with reversibility itself. So who talked about reversibility of chronic diseases? Not the medical guys, the surgical guys. So when they did the Swedish obese subject study post bariatric surgery, they actually showed remission of diabetes mellitus. And this shook us. And currently, the American Diabetes Association has released the statement endorsing this term remission in diabetes, and they have categorized remission into different types of remission: complete, partial, prolonged, and so on, based on the timeline and the clinical status. So that was about reversibility and remission. And I just want to start off with the strength of association. So let's look at how strong is the association of lifestyle with disease pattern. So I want to draw your attention to the study published in 2006 from America. When they looked at Pima Indians, they were having very high burden of diabetes, and they were living in two different geographical areas with totally different social and economic factors around them. So when they looked at the Pima Indians who were living in Mexico, which is their original place, versus the Pima Indians living in US, which is where they came to live, there was a big difference in the diabetes rate. So the Mexican Pima Indians had about 5%, whereas the Pima Indians living in US had about 30 to 40%. So they went back and looked at the lifestyle factors, and the staggering figures were the diet that the US Pima Indians consumed were very low in fiber, and the calorie contribution was predominantly from fat. Also, if we look at the physical activity, while those Pima Indians who lived in Mexico had about 30 hours of intensive physical activity in a week versus 3 hours of physical activity in those who lived in the US. So Pima Indians, they also did very smartly the genetic analysis of the Pima Indians living here and there, and the genetic analysis and match was 99.99%. So what does that tell us? Genetic loads the gun, but lifestyle is what pulls the trigger. So the next criteria is temporality. So I will draw your attention to another country, Cuba. So in this country, they had very smart people who looked at data across many, many years. So in 1991, when the Soviet Union was dissolved, they went into a time of economic crisis. So what did that do to their population? They didn't have fuel to power their motor vehicles, so they all switched to walking, so much so that they imported bicycles, about 1 million from China. And their physical activity acutely increased during this orange color period, which is when the economic depression happened. Also, they were rationed on their calorie, so their calorie intake actually dropped. And this actually rose up again when the economy flourished. So with this in the background, let me take you to the graph on that end. So there we have incidence of obesity, incidence of diabetes, and prevalence of diabetes. You can see that with the increase in physical activity and drop in dietary calorie overload, the incidence of all these chronic diseases dropped down. And as the economy picked up, you can see that there's a sharp rise. So that establishes the temporal association of lifestyle factors with non-communicable diseases. You can also see into 2010, they have been followed up, and you can see that the graph in the center shows there's a populational shift towards having a higher BMI with the flourishing economy. So what do we learn from the Cuba? So Cuba taught us behavior change, which was increased physical activity, was driven by policy. They were given bicycles and there was no fuel. And they were given bullock cart-led agriculture, and they were so motivated to survive together during that 5-year period of economic depression. So that held the population quite motivated and stayed together. So behavior change can be achieved through personal motivation as well as policy changes. So consistency, do we see a case for consistency for all the lifestyle risk factors across the globe, across the ages? Yes, we do. This is from the famous Framingham Heart Study. So they have shown strong association of consuming cereal fiber, whole grains to be protective against all the lifestyle risk factors, including diabetes and cardiac disease. Also, consumption of food products which are high in glycemic index, which is all the reformed carbohydrates, increases the risk of metabolic syndrome. This is from the Adventist Health Study. The same is shown in terms of dietary risk factors. We see that as the diet becomes more plant-based, there is a protective effect. And this is from the North Karelia study. This was a policy implementation where they targeted reduction in saturated animal fat consumption, reduction in salt consumption and smoking through regulatory measures for their country. And you can see that the precipitous drop in the death rate due to cardiovascular diseases. So we have already covered some part of the globe, and some more part I will take you through. These are all studies from China, UK, USA, and Australia and India. So all these are very large cohort studies with populations ranging from 1,000 to 1 lakh to many, many lakhs who have been followed up for long years from many, many decades. And all of them show very strong association of various dietary risk factors, physical activity risk factors for diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, malignancies, as well as inflammatory diseases. So I wouldn't be on time if I run through each of these studies. I have them fill up for the next 3 slides. So that's the amount of evidence we have. And finally, this is hot out of the press just couple of days before in neonates, the first 1,000 days of life, meaning including the in utero period, decreased exposure to white sugar reduces the risk of diabetes and hypertension by about 35 and 20% respectively when these children were followed up in the UK Biobank study. So we have evidences accumulating like this, and it is consistent all over. And what about specificity? Are there very specific recommendations showing a standalone evidence? Yes. So this is from the DASH study, which we are all aware of. Very specifically, when the diet is rich in fruits, vegetables, and fiber, it clearly shows a drop in the blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic. Also, having a diet low in fat and cholesterol did show the same. Some more being specific for specific diets, Mediterranean diet, which is again a predominant plant-based diet with less of saturated fats, also showed a decrease in MI and cardiovascular incident rates. So is there a biological gradient appreciated in all these studies? Yes. So we see that as the dietary pattern moves into less of saturated fats, we see there is a dose-response relationship here. And here, as the fiber content increases, there is a dose-response relationship. As the whole grain consumption increases, there is a dose-response relationship. Okay, so just a break from all the heavy statistics. This is from Sherlock Holmes, who advised Dr. Watson, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So as I wondered, is diabetes reversible? Again, that was the question that I started off with saying, can we reverse these chronic diseases? So however improbable, it must be the truth. So the next one I'm coming to is biological plausibility. Is it plausible biologically to reverse diabetes? Are there studies to support it? Yes, there are. So this is from NEGM. So what they have found is we always had this thought process that with stress, high glucose, blood glucose levels, and high insulin resistance, the beta cells were thought to be apoptotic and dead and gone. But there's a new paradigm shift in this thought process that these cells are actually getting reprogrammed and they de-differentiate into alpha cells, which is evidenced by high glucagon levels and high hepatic insulin resistance and increase in alpha cell mass. And also, when some of these studies were done in animals, when they put these mice through lifestyle changes, they found that the molecular markers for the beta cells did disappear and become alpha cell under insulin resistance time. And they also reversed and re-obtained the markers for beta cell function when the changes were done in the reverse stage. So that is quite encouraging for us to see that there is a biological plausibility to say that the beta cells may still be sitting there still as alpha cells and may have a chance to de-differentiate and come back and function as good beta cells. So do we have coherence? Is this seen across all non-communicable diseases? Yes. So there's a lot of work going on in gut microbiome. So this is in inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, and obesity. So they have defined few microbiome patterns as pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. So whenever the diet changes, the microbiota are also seen to change sides. So this is a study which shows that whenever there was a dietary fiber intake which was high, that showed a favorable disease outcome. The disease activity reduced. Whenever the diet was low in fiber, the disease activity did increase. But mind you, some of us think fiber can be supplemented. So you can clearly see that they have looked at supplemented fiber. It didn't really function the same way. So only the high fiber, which was inherently present in the natural diet, did the magic, not the supplemented fiber. They also documented the pattern of microbiome which swapped from pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory type with the dietary change. So have we experimented with this? Yes, we have. This is from Lancet long time ago, Dr. D. Nornish's trial where he documented reversal of atherosclerosis. Those days, statins was not yet the standard of care. So he had the luxury of randomizing patients into statin arm and non-statin arm. So the non-statin arm did have reversal of the atherosclerotic plaque, whereas the statin arm had a progression documented. So do we have more of these? Yes, we have. You can see the timeline from 2001 till 2017. There are many randomized controlled trials which have demonstrated remission of diabetes over here. So we don't lack any experiments. Do we have analogy? This is Dr. Best and Banting. So when they were battling the type 1 diabetes, this was a statement released in New York Times when they came up with insulin. So they said, one by one, the implacable enemies of man, the diseases which seek his destruction, are overcome by science. Diabetes, one of the most dreaded, is latest to succumb when insulin came in for type 1 diabetes. So I'm quite hopeful that the type 2 diabetes, one of the most dreaded, should be the latest to succumb in our time period. So some take-home points of practical implementation as soon as each of us go back to our working places. As we ran through the evidences that we have, simple things we can do is give a simple lifestyle prescription when the patient leaves our OPD. So nutrition-wise, you can tell them eat a plant predominant diet, take more of whole grains, don't take refined carbohydrates, and at least take 3 to 4 servings of fruits and vegetables and a handful of nuts and seeds. These are all evidence based. And what about exercise? We know that aerobic training minimum for 30 minutes per day for 5 days, at least a week, is actually the minimum recommended. So we need not tell patients that do at least this. We have to tell them, you have to do this and do more than this. Also, there's new evidence to say that resistance training helps muscles overcome insulin resistance. So resistance training should be given twice a day. We can send them to the physiotherapist who can teach them proper resistance training for muscle groups. Sarcopenia is well known to add to the mortality in our population, and resistant training has a lot of role in Indian population. Sleep, we should encourage our patients to sleep at least 7 hours continuously in a day. Stress reduction and social support, and stopping substance use. So these are the things that we do in our OPD day in and day out. And what's the way ahead? We have American College of Lifestyle Medicine. We do have Indian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. In CMC, the Unit 4 is the Lifestyle Medicine Unit. We have OPD, IP services where we integrate these principles. We have written a book for the public to read and understand it by themselves. We are involved in educating UGs and PGs, and we have started a PGDLM course for faculty who are outside CMC who can join us in learning. And we do have multicentric trials going on in the Indian context. So this is the book that we published recently. This is for the common man. This is available on Amazon, and there's a soft copy which is free of cost, which you can download and read. And this is our first batch of PGDLM students. We had doctors and allied health professionals trained with hands-on sessions on culinary skills. So when we say non-refined products, we need to tell them what to do with the whole grains. So we do teach them cooking, and we teach them resistance training and nitty-gritty things about exercise. And we have social connections with them and long-lasting bonds with them. So this is the lifestyle medicine team. I want to thank all our students and patients who continue to teach us, and all the teachers on whose shoulders we stand and speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Esther. Our next talk